I just want to know an update where we are with the Endeavour replicas at this stage, please.
Yeah, we've just been talking about that with Garrett, so Garrett can give you a bit.
Through the chair, as per the action sheet update, we have a total of 19,000 in our renewals budget. We are working with the two key stakeholders, and Mr. Kibble and Mr. Bryant, around the project, and we've identified that to complete both boats to their spec, we're looking at about 48,000. So we're still looking for the funding at this stage. We're still looking for the secondary funding.
Thanks, Garrett. Would there be any sensibility into doing one based on the budget that we could get one done? Is there any sensibility to that, or do we have to commit to two? Thanks.
We haven't looked at what that would look like in terms of the costing, whether it would be cheaper. I think for now we're looking at what needs to be done around the CAD drawings, and then I think that's the initial cost up front. We've also tried to engage with EIT around the labour cost, but well, doing the labour, but we've had no success with that yet. So we could look at doing one to start with, but we just don't have those details yet.
Thank you. I'd suggest that perhaps high schools may be able to do the CAD design now, not just the IT. I believe Lynn High School's program is very good, and yeah, so there might be other avenues for design work. And I don't know if council, I think we did decide to progress with the aluminium frame. Did we make a decision on that, or was it just that we would seek funding for? Yeah, so just saying that Mr. Bryant is a key stakeholder. He's possibly a supplier, not a key stakeholder, and so if we don't achieve a budget, it may be that we don't look at doing it in aluminium, and we try to progress one of the previous methods, which was to find a volunteer organisation to go through the repairs. Yeah, saying we should try to progress pretty quickly, hopefully.
Just one. Can we get a kind of a report, an update on the next meeting, or so we've kind of got a meeting happening, so we can try and, I mean, the original intent was to have something up by Christmas. Is that still doable, or?
We can bring a report to October committee. Our aim is, to get them up as soon as possible, but with the delays in funding, we may not be able to achieve the Christmas outcome. But we can look at that in the next few weeks, and then bring that October report.
And so, we're having communication with the stakeholders, like Martin and
ongoing, yes.
Cool. Great, thank you.
Okay, page 16, the Peel Street toilets options. Now, we've been talking about this for several years. It'd be really nice to get some sort of decision. But, yeah. Anyway. Yeah, Bill, you kick it off, mate. Yeah.
I thought we would actually put this to bed. If you recall, I think it was Future Tairāwhiti, we moved that funding be allocated forward so that they still had access to it. That to me was the decision in terms of we are going to do these toilets up, no longer muck around and procrastinate and carry on and come back every 2 or 3 meetings and say, well, here's another option. That's how I feel on this one. It needs to be done.
Yeah, difficulty we've got there, Bill, is we've had a maximum on that on 400,000 and we can't get anywhere near it.
I understand perfectly, but in times of duress, this organisation has always been able to come up with as much as it's needed to get something done.
Councillor Dowson?
Thank you. Perhaps the attitude we can always get as much as we needed is why we're pressing our debt cap currently, and progressing projects that can't come in budget. It's probably not a sensible idea. What I see here is a failure to recognise that every previous quote and construction cost and strengthening cost was already well over budget, and then we came back with a budget of 400k to try to squeeze the project within. There's no indication in any of the information in the report that there was ever someone who could do it for 400,000. So we either need to look at an entirely new approach to the project, or cancel or scrap the project altogether, because it's not within our means at the moment, and certainly not within our budget. And I would imagine that the new approach starts with solely strengthening the building so that it can be repurposed or regenerated in the future, but to save the building from either being removed in 2022, is that right? When it needs to be demolished if it's not safe. So yeah, I would look at revising structural costs, which you probably have a good idea of at the moment, because of the tendering process, and getting back to us on what that might be alone, just on structural repairs. Thank you.
Just on that, the earthquake strengthening requirements are different if it's not used. So if it's closed, it doesn't require the strengthening. Okay.
Through the chair, when we started this process 5 years ago around the redevelopment, we did engage Opus, who did provide some really high costing. We then went back to the drawing board and had a conversation with the contractor, essentially, who put the one tender in very, very early on in the piece, and that's where the 400,000 came from, was a conversation and a rough order cost from them. Now, the difference between that price and what we've got now is obviously we've got really detailed design drawings around the strengthening requirements, and obviously what comes after the strengthening requirements. When we went through the process, we went out in an open tender process for 4 weeks, got nothing. We then went closed for 4 weeks, got one interested contractor who subsequently put the price in that we're dealing with now. In our conversations since then, we've sat down and we've gone through line by line to identify, well, could we provide any cost saving opportunities? And we're only looking at potentially saving 100k. Also, in those conversations, we looked at the strengthening component of just strengthening the building, but what we were going to be looking at is quite a high cost, so somewhere in the 400,000k mark for the strengthening, the 400,000 for just for strengthening. Oh, okay, cool. And also, as part of just looking at the strengthening, we wouldn't really get an asset that's usable, so it would essentially be gutted and unusable, but it would be compliant in terms of the new building standard for earthquake strengthening building. So we have done our homework on this, and that's why we've taken the approach that the recommendation looks at putting in a 24-hour facility that will still satisfy the patrons down there, and putting in investment into Bright Street, which will lift that facility standard for the future. Because if you remember, and the report speaks to it, council made that decision in 1996 to basically close Peel Street once Bright Street was open. So yeah. So I guess that's where we're up to. The report's there, and you know.
In terms of the strengthening, it highlights in here that it's under 37%, I believe, and that it's areas of the building that only certain areas of the building that don't meet compliance. Can I ask if those are areas of the building that would put it at a physical risk or only at an insurance risk? Because we've had to make decisions based on that in the past, whether it's an insurance risk or a risk to health, and it seems that maybe our own rules are too stringent on insurance risk versus health risk.
Through the chair, I think that's probably a good question for the building department, but the national standard is if you're under 33%, basically it's not suitable for public use, and that's why it's been listed to be closed in 2022. I just need to clarify that because there was a comment before that closure means demolition. We've been through the whole discussion with the community in the last around 20 years ago around Council's proposal to demolish the building. Council can't demolish the building under current council planning rules, and we wouldn't propose to do that. Closure is just that it wouldn't be available for public use from 2022 unless it was strengthened. So I think given that the building has elements under 33%, we really don't have a choice in whether it's closed for public safety reasons.
Point of clarification, council requires 67% plus, is that right? Whereas government requires 37 and over. Somewhere in between we don't accept because we want a higher health and safety standard, and that's not necessarily always the case that holds it back from reaching that 67.
Yeah, I recall the discussions, I think, around the 33 and the 67%. There are different interpretations, I think, in that intermediary area. Certainly for council buildings, we take the approach of 67%, but this building is a little bit clearer in that it has elements that are well under the 33%.
When this last come up for discussion, I was quite adamant that 400,000 was my top limit, and I was still of that view. So for me, it's about getting to a decision, and if there's, I don't think the project's sexy enough to attract a lot of outside funding. I think that's an issue with it. You know, other projects with a building like this may be able to attract extra funding. So I think now we've got to look at what does it look like if it's not a toilet. The building's got to remain because it's got historic content to it. So I'd like to have confidence that the external presentation of the building was always kept up to speed. So it always had that look nice. The other aspect is, do we need a toilet in that exact or near location? And it seems from a lot of the consultation that we do. So the recommendations are quite, are quite good on those points. We've got the facility, we save the building, and we haven't got the expense of doing double of what we're willing to budget towards it. So, so from that, the allocation of the 300K to the existing CBT, we need to remember that the Bright Street facility was put there as a facility because we're expecting to lose this. The Bright Street facility is there. It's looking quite good, so I'm not sure why we need to put a 300K capital budget to improvements in that. So I'd like to know what needs doing down on the Bright Street, and I'd like to know sort of whether people are looking towards leaving the existing building there, keeping it maintained nicely, having another facility.
Through the chair, yes, we would look at maintaining the external facade of the building so that it doesn't detract away from the adjacent neighbouring buildings. So that's always part of our current schedule, so we would maintain that. In terms of the recommendation, it says up to 300K. So it's not necessarily spending the full amount, and we haven't scoped what those improvements to Bright Street look like yet. But it was the remainder of the Peel Street budget that we used for any improvements to Bright Street, and it was up to 300,000. So we can do less if that's what's required of the building, but we would certainly do no more.
Yeah, this is so interesting, this issue. When I look at the map on page 22 and see all of the public toilets that we've got, I'm quite happy if we were to take away the Peel Street toilet and think that we have enough facilities there for the public. I think our conversation should probably shift to, given that we can't demolish the building, we should be talking about how are we going to repurpose it, or if we're going to repurpose it. Given that it is historic, I think I'm starting to think that we should be deciding whether we should be strengthening this building for repurposing. And while we don't have the budget for the next life that this building is going to take, can we strengthen the building for now with the budget we've got, and then get budget in the next annual plan to take it to its next phase of its life? That's what I'm thinking, given that we can't demolish it. But from a public toilet perspective, I don't think removing the Peel Street toilet and not replacing it with a nighttime facility is going to disrupt the number of toilets in the CBD. What I do want to know, though, is are there any nighttime facilities in the CBD? Are any of those toilets we've got there open at night? Bright Street, Derby Street, Bogle Street?
Through the chair, Derby Street is open 24 hours. What the map also doesn't show is the proposed inner harbour amenity block that's going in. It also doesn't include the public facility that's been included in the library. So Bright Street essentially has two public facilities, and we have the amenity block that's going in at Inner Harbour, which will service that end of town. The bars were around Peel Street, were in the adjacent businesses felt that a nighttime facility was needed, because if there wasn't somewhere for them to go after they all spilled out onto the street at 3 a.m, you'd end up with stuff happening in doorways of businesses that could potentially get under doors. So that was always a consideration that we factored in, is that do we want businesses to have to deal with that from, the weekend situation?
How many bars are we talking about, and what number of people are we talking about? Because sounds like this is massive numbers of people, but I can't say I've seen them.
Through the chair, I understand those are the hot spots at the moment, and so there are quite a few people that go to those bars during the weekends.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for lateness, but I came because of this paper. I just think that because of my involvement with the Canberra Trust, that is, as Mr. Blair's just said, a really busy place at night time. And when you look at the map, most of the bars are in Peel Street. There is one in Derby, and there's others towards the Inner Harbour. But that Peel Street area, I think we would need to consult with the police about what they see, and it's quite a lot of people that are in that area of town at night time. So I do think we should think about how we provide a service. I know we could say they should use the facility in the bar that they're in before they leave, but that's not what happens, as was described, I think, the last time we had this debate. Thank you.
Councillor Finding was before me, but okay. Look, after reading this report, I kind of feel there's a bit of information well, lacking a little bit of information actually. One is there is a heritage fund out there that is dedicated to provincial areas in particular for heritage buildings and the strengthening of them. So a question for me would be, have we applied to this heritage fund for this particular reason? It's an iconic building. The community has told us many times in the past that it is their preferred option to have a toilet in that area. So there needs to be something there. And I would like to see what a 100K 24-hour toilet looks like, or even a 200K one, because there obviously needs to, if this is not going to be used as a toilet, if this is one scenario, then we need to look at the alternatives and to make sure that they're appropriate for that area. The area, you know, when you drive past, is actually iconic to the main street of the town, with the lovely fencing around it and the historical signage. The building itself has got so much merit, and you know, a question that I'd have to ask is, can it be sold? I mean, there'd be developers out there, or there could be developers out there that could have a field day on a particular site like that for numerous other uses, cafe, whatever, a little food out there. There's, you know, when you go around the world or anywhere, even in New Zealand, you see what old toilets have been turned into and transitioned into, and they're actually iconic, and they do retain the heritage. You know, the heritage status of that particular area and that particular part of town is actually critical. And having a toilet in that particular part of town is also critical, because it's the only centre. With Peel Street, the Bright Street toilets, they're way out of the centre of, well, they are a bit out of the centre of town. To spend extra 300K on them when we just spent a huge amount of money on a library with public toilets right there as well, seems to me like a bit of an overkill for having toilets in that particular area. You've also got McDonald's there, which cater for a lot of people, and they've got public toilets. So that particular area is overly catered for. So, you know, there's quite a few questions I would like to have answered before I make a decision on this. I wouldn't be happy today to go to any of these recommendations and approve them. I would like to have some other different scenarios come back to us, because, you know, is the site able to be sold? I mean, is that a particular scenario where it could be win-win, where we retain the heritage building, we have its usage maybe into a different use, we've still got toilets at the back. Yeah, so yeah, there's quite a few different scenarios I'd like to have a look at, please.
Thank you, Councillor Cranston. When this first came across our table, I was actually in favour of a nighttime facility and us closing down the Peel Street toilets, because due to cost. However, that's not what the community wanted, and that's not the recommendation that we came to. The recommendation we came to was 400K to revitalise the Peel Street toilets as they are. We've gone out to market twice, and we've been unsuccessful both times. So I think that this is I think installing a nighttime toilet facility is the best thing to cater to the needs of the people that require public conveniences in that area. However, because we resolved to spend 400,000 on that Peel Street toilet, I would like to see the other 300,000 definitely going to public conveniences, but actually the first priority be Peel Street. And I know that the community said we want this to still remain toilets, but it's unfeasible for us, and we don't want to up how much more money we're spending, but I would like to see the priority for that money and ideas, like how Councillor Foster was saying, ideas for the spend of that money on Peel Street to come back to us, rather than entirely taking that 300K away and going, oh, it's not going to work, we're going to spend it over here now. So I'm actually happy to support 2A and B, but I'm not too flash on 2C.
I'd be happy to move that Council resolves not to progress with strengthening upgrading Peel Street toilets at this time, allocates 100K of existing capital budget to a nighttime facility in Peel Street, retains the $300,000 of existing capital budget, and seeks additional funding to meet the upgrade of the Bright Street toilets facility. and that's with the ideal that we keep looking for external funders who may be able to meet the shortfall in our budget, and council would have the potential to accept a higher budget project if the quantum of council's investment wasn't to be more than the retained 300,000. For Peel Street, sorry, for Peel Street.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I was more along the lines of combining B and C because I don't believe that the Bright Street toilet's going to need anywhere near that budget because it's actually quite good. And then using some of that 300K if the new facility at Peel Street wasn't satisfactory enough under a 100K budget.
The reason I didn't include it is because this isn't a paper about Bright Street and I have no information on the requirement for Bright Street upgrade whatsoever. So I haven't put it in there, and I think this is a Peel Street issue. We can retain and not spend that 300K at this time, and or keep it in budget for future if we can find, as Councillor Foster suggested, heritage funding, tourism funding. We've had 4 public facilities funded in the last 12 months for up the coast and in the harbour. We should be seeking funding for this project. It's not an unappealing project. It could be quite appealing.
All it is to the people from the coast, that's the first stop in town for the vast majority of them. This has been litigated I don't know how many times, and each time the pushback comes. I've followed it from the time council got taken to court and lost. I came into council just after that, and their response by way of pushback was to spend a minimum amount and do some painting, because they were so miffed about losing the case. Fast forward, here we are, 2018, and we're 2 steps away from closing a facility that is highly regarded by those that are out of town. The money issue shouldn't be the issue. I know it is, and that's what this case is built around at present. I use the Bright Street toilets regularly to shower. They are not widely used. I know from the fact that I go there both mornings before meetings or sometimes before they close. The Peel Street toilet is well utilised. The community have told us they want it retained. And just as an aside, because I had a personal interest in it, I would like, Gareth, I went to the businesses and asked the question, how vital is this? And they said it's very vital because they themselves haven't got the extent of toilets that they need to cater for their public. So anyway, I mean, you guys are my colleagues here. I just don't want to see this thing closed. And to be fair, if you think about it, the amount of money we've spent on consultants would have fixed the thing a long time ago. We balked at the 600,000 from the Auckland crowd, the quote. Now we're balking at 400,000. That's me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that I wonder whether it isn't that we develop such a grand plan. I mean, I'm sure we've all used the Wairoa public toilets, and they are an old building, but they're nicely tiled inside and always really clean. I mean, why do we have to have, the Rolls-Royce version when we potentially could have tiled the inside of the toilets, which is much less structurally important, structurally costly, and still retain the use of them? Because I do support what Councillor Burdett had just said. While initially I raised the point about the nighttime facility, we do need a facility there. We can't think we can do without it. And you've just heard how it's important to another group of our population. But I just think we set out with too grand an idea, and that tiling the facility as it is would be probably much more cost effective, easier to clean, because I know that was the issue, that we needed to make them more suitable and more easily cleaned, I understand. But I just think maybe council officers should look at that. And my question is, and while it's not related to that toilet, are you going to get a standalone toilet with a male and female cubicle for 100,000? Because if you think about the cost of the little toilet blocks that have been placed along the coast, and I think they're more than 100,000. So is that a reasonable figure?
Yeah, on the issue of tiling, that's something I've brought up as well. But the problem is the earthquake strengthening. That's where the cost is. And if people are going to go in there, the earthquake strengthening has to be done. We can't just flash it up by tiling it. So that's been the hiccup all the way along, really. Yeah.
But not every council is going to 100% of earthquake code. I mean, this council, I mean, I've been reading a whole lot of material lately, and I went to the seminar on Friday, and not every council is going to 100% of the earthquake code. I know we wouldn't want anyone to be hurt in there, but we do need to think about it. And I'd like the answer to my question, is 100,000 reasonable for a standalone facility with male and female cubicles?
Through the chair, we don't have that, but what we're basing our decision off, well, our recommendation off is the coast toilets that we've installed. So we installed 4 at the coast for 270,000. So we're looking at around
Thank you.
70 to 100 for a standalone facility at
Thanks.
Peel Street.
I think I'm very inclined to try and separate it out. Do we need a toilet there, or do we need a toilet in that particular building? This 100K for installing a nighttime facility, why does that have to be a nighttime facility? Why can't that be the toilet facility? That probably puts a bit of an expense up, but from what Bill was saying, the coast use and that, they're not desperate to do it in that particular building, but they do need an accessible toilet in that location. So what's the rationale by calling it just a nighttime facility? And can it be a full day facility?
Through the chair, the nighttime facility was in conjunction with the redevelopment of Peel Street. So if you cast your memories back to when we did a trial at Peel Street around closing it at nighttime versus leaving it open for 24 hours a day because of vandalism, unsavoury behaviour, we found that a lot of that was stopped. But we still found that the bars needed, you know, that facility at night when the spill from the 3 a.m. rush was still in play. So the idea was that we redevelop Peel Street, close it at night, but have a nighttime facility for after those you know, at night basically. So is the question is, could you upgrade Peel Street without the 24-hour facility and have it open 24 hours? You could, but we would need to understand what that meant for the unsavoury behaviour and vandalism.
I think that's asking the opposite. The nighttime facility will be available during the day.
Yes. If you upgrade Peel Street, no. The idea is that it's...
We need a toilet in there. We don't need it in a historic building, but if we put another toilet, can that be a facility that's used during the day and the night so that Bill's concerned about people coming down and needing a toilet in that location is addressed?
Yes, that's the plan, is to have that toilet as the standalone toilet to service that part of town, night and day.
And I think you'll find you'll have less those vandalism type problems as well with a facility like at Wairau, the first one at Wairau, where you've got cubicles. You know, I think the worst vandalism problems are where you've got 3 or 4 pans in one area. Then it's got the potential to upset the whole area. But on a cubicle basis, I think it works a lot more. So I'd definitely consider that. Repurposing the building, Councillor Dunn and others have said, oh, let's repurpose it and get it ready for some other activity. I'm not in agreement with that without knowing what that repurposement would look like, because we don't, yeah. But we can close the facility, have it, keep it flash, and have that in as an option going forward. So, yeah, with that said, I am happy with the recommendation. Anyone got anything else? So the recommendations, do you want to read out what we've got? we've got 1, 2 and 2A. There's just some changes to B and C, which Councillor Dowsing, you got?
I haven't got them down
Mm.
fully, but.
So results not to progress with strengthening our Dragon Field Street toilet at this time.
Yep.
That's 100K of existing capital budget to install toilet facility, we should call it, because it's been 24 hours, it's slightly capital lives. Field Street facility. And then C, retains up to 300K of existing capital budget to improve existing Field Street facility. And seeks additional funding for, to meet budget shortfall.
I just wonder whether that could be more general, that see it as a CBD toilet fund. You know, so it can sort of be.
Just call it a facility. Or
Yeah.
We don't need to specify the uses in that retention.
Yeah. So that's been.
Additional funds to upgrade the facility.
Yeah, cool. Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Dowsing, second by Councillor Forring. Just one. Oh, okay, Andrew, yep.
So Chair, when you're talking about the facility, are you talking about the building or are you talking about a toilet facility?
I'm talking about the building.
Yeah. For whatever purpose.
If we find opportunity to seek funding for it. If we find funding to seek, that we can apply for to make it a public facility, a toilet facility, and that aligns with what we've already proposed, and you can achieve that funding, then excellent. If you find other opportunity, for example, you know, just a heritage fund that would just strengthen the building at this stage, great. If you know, but it's really about looking for opportunity and looking for that funding partner to make something happen in this space, because whilst we had an appetite for a $400,000 public toilet, I don't think anyone has an appetite for $1 million public toilet, and that's the point.
Just clarification on that. Are we saying that going forward, the future is only going to be a toilet? No?
No, just
No,
the Woolsey.
okay, I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favour? Against? Carry. And just, I'll probably state the obvious here, just make sure there's crossover that the new toilets existing before the Field Street one's closed. Sort of line those things up. All right, thanks very much. I don't think it's my progress, but I don't know.
Feels like the progress you could have in 20 years ago.
Page 54, public places plan.
No, Kater.
So is there anything you want us to?
I guess just in summary, as you know, the community facilities strategy was adopted in January 2018, and this is the first of the remaining 3 plans that we need to go out to consultation. So largely we're asking for approval to consult with the community on our public places, our art and public places plan. There's high level aspirations around, while addressing some issues around working together with community, what constitutes public art, and finally how we can use public art to contribute to placemaking. So that's really, I guess in a nutshell, the issues we're trying to address through this plan. There will be some resource requirement, but we're looking at the next LTP to get that.
That's good, Kata. The establishment of a public arts seed fund, I've seen that work really well in other places. Places not many people go that often, Palmerston North in particular. I did speak with them about it quite a bit in their square, and it was just pretty basic. one period in time, and then they decided to do exactly this, to set up a fund of 50,000 a year, and that 50,000 bought an art piece each year, and it's really transformed that whole city centre of Palmerston North, because they had the foresight to allocate specific amounts to art. So it's a really good idea if we can pull it off, to have that established public art fund, if we've got a purpose for that fund, you know, rather than just having a fund and, oh, we've got some money, let's grab a piece of art, let's get some direction around it, you know. And I think that's a good opportunity. I did want to ask about the position, internal resource. I mean, that did come through the community facilities strategy, and we are positioning that at the moment. We're sort of looking at that. Would this be a different position to the one that we're currently looking at on the community facilities strategy, or can it be incorporated into the same role?
I understand as we're developing the work program for that role, it looks highly likely that it might be a new resource required. Because I guess the sporting facilities and the approach it's quite comprehensive. I think Hawaiki Tūranga is considered, I guess, separate to navigations, and although it will be an asset as part of the plan, I'm not up to date with the status yet. So
Hawaiki Tūranga is, even though councils are contributed to it, is not a council project, and it's not an Art and Public Places Trust project either.
You know, I thought this paper was really well written and really interesting, actually. So, yeah, I had similar questions just at the end of 65 with the other sculptors that are coming up that haven't got pricing to them, and the Seawells project, Awarua murals, I mean, holding yards at port. What are these projects that are coming up, are they, that artworks that are coming up?
The costs there are replacement costs, so we haven't got them yet, so we don't need to replace them yet until we've got them.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah, but there's a Seawells project coming through.
I saw Kelly there yesterday, actually, and that's progressing quite well, and that's coming up late October.
Yeah. Starts next month.
Yeah.
It's funded by majority ECT.
Yep.
And external partners.
Cool.
Support as well.
Yeah, great. The other thing I saw was having a base and council being heavily involved with driving the art around the place, and like permanent artwork that are going to be planned for the future coming through the ComDev committee. But I've got some concerns when the temporary one is going, temporary artwork goes to public art and public places. Does there need to be some coordination somewhere so there's a committee that's actually driving this? Because, you know, for me, public art is so important, and it's transformational for a lot of cities and regions. So it would be really good that we got them behind and really tried to promote it as much as possible, and you know, seek funding where we can to help these different ones come through. But it needs to be coordinated through one area, really. So it's got a driving force rather than being fragmented. You know, so art and public places are meeting with us, and we're all on the same page, basically. So is that a futuristic way that we should be looking at things, or are we happy that we're going to have temporary art looking in one area over here, and we're doing the permanent art, and there's a bit of no coordination? I just kind of thought it was a little bit dysfunctional when I read that, actually.
Through the chair, thanks for your question, councillor. That would be something that we'd expect to support through the new resource. So we've got some constraints around how we implement some of the plan. Our expectation is that we'll get a good feel for how the plan rolls out in the next 3 years, and we'll see where our gaps are, but that's certainly a gap as we see it now. And hopefully we'll support that, that trust in its role in public art as we go forward, once we see how we might fund and support through our new resourcing. Yep.
Okay, so going back to the resource requirement of a 0.5 FTE and a 50K public art seed fund, has there been any discussions about whether that is potentially available somewhere?
As you know, there's currently no budget available for it. We have a community partnerships leader that we're developing the framework, and this may begin those conversations. But as I said, we're looking to the next LTP to seek funding for that resource.
All right, if there's nothing further, the recommendations are on page 54. And it's just to get this out to public consultation. Seconded by Councillor Paruhinga. It's moved by Councillor Burdett. Sorry, Councillor Dowsett.
There was a couple of contradictions in the paper, and through the chair, I'd just like clarification. On 62, for example, page 62, it says, the plan is concerned with provision of physical artworks, does not include heritage buildings, monuments, but the following page, when we've done an asset review, it does include monuments and memorials. So we need to be very clear whether, I mean, we're stating it doesn't, but then we catalogue as part of it that we do. I guess my largest issue with this is defining exactly what we want from this. And I think Councillor Foster was thinking in a similar vein to myself, but this is really, I think, a strategic view of our Arts and Public Places, whereas we already have Arts and Public Places Trust who does fundraising, but they're working on a project by project basis, not on a city planning basis, and that's the shortfall at the moment, is that we're not looking at scope. Now, I wonder if that scope is best led by an individual in the organisation or best led by council, and taking a approach first of all as to what we desire from our Arts and Public Places, because we haven't had that discussion. And whilst I'm on Arts and Public Places Trust, I'm only a member of it who helps work towards the end goal of a project, and we're not. And as a council, we haven't actually made our own decision of what we want. And I think that's where this conversation should start before it goes. Well, consultation with the public is perfect, because that informs us. So I'm happy for this to go to public and consult the public. But then I think it's the greater discussion of what we want. And I think that's something that we need to workshop or discuss further before allocation is made for staffing and how we gear up in the future. As whole of council. As whole of council, yes.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that, Councillor Dowsett.
Happy to accommodate that in post-consultation as well, because it will inform the debate.
Yep. All right, nothing further. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
Mr. Chairman, while we're on art, can I just ask where the art is out of here? Because if you remember, about 4 months ago, we had a resolution that was 100% supported by council that the art that hung in the old chamber would come back into here. So there were 2 pieces of very nice art that had been there for years, plus the photo of the Queen and the crest, and they're not here yet. The Queen seems to come in on an easel at a full council meeting, but I just think that was resolved, that the art come back into the chamber. And so can we please have some action on that?
Someone look into that?
I don't have the answer for that today, but we will come back to council with an answer.
It's in consultation with someone about how it gets hung. I know that, but it's taken a long time.
It's been well consulted with the Manatuki communities. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dunn, second by Councillor Dowsing. Nothing on that? All good? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
I think Councillor McLean's lucky that we're favourable today. We could have put the brakes on it while he was absent.
Looks reasonably refuelled. We'll move on to page 126, the Recreation Services update. Please say something, Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you. I do want to let us and also yourselves know as well that we've really noticed the difference in regards to recreational service engagement in our area of Kaiti, but also in the wider kind of sense of Gizzy as well. Just really noticing the vehicles around and the people doing the mahi, but also the related cleanliness of areas and things getting like bins getting emptied relatively quickly, all of those kinds of things. I mean, just the other day, I'm not too sure how, but somebody bent a road sign there was a bent road sign as I kind of drove past. I went back past maybe about an hour later and it had already been corrected, like it was absolutely fantastic. So it's just little things like that which you expect as a community to be done, they're being done. And the staff that are part of recreational services, they're quite pleasant to deal with as well. So I just wanted to provide that feedback.
Yeah, no, I just want to reiterate that of Councillor Wharehinga's. That's been so noticeable, actually, the transition of the quality of work and the dedication of the staff. And they've all got big smiles on their face. They love what they're doing, and it's totally reflective on the outcome of their work. I'm getting so many comments about our whole environment with our gardens on the main street, the entrance into town, all our lawns, the regularity, the consistency. So yeah, it's a huge improvement, and it's really pleasing. And being a councillor, you can't help but feel proud that that we've got done this, and the community has really applauded this big move. The cleanliness of the toilets also has been improved. So in all respects, it's been such a massive transition and such a positive one for the region too. So yeah, congratulations, fantastic. I do have a question though with the unscheduled and reactive works. There's obviously been a little bit of a problem there because we don't know. It's obviously unscheduled and it's reactive. How are we going to come to grips with that? And have you got an amicable way that you're dealing with it with them for the future?
Through the chair, we have. So we identified that probably halfway through the first year that it was underestimated in terms of just what unscheduled and reactive looks like. So we've been having ongoing dialogue with recreational services, senior management, and what we've now got is 2 response staff. So they have they've created another resource that's basically 50% project management. So that's project managing all the work, scheduling all the work, 50% on the tools. And they've also employed a secondary response person who's a qualified builder that will basically take them to the next step and get through all the reactive and unscheduled work that we've got on our list. So we're quite excited about that because that just means we can actually, transform our business as a whole, but also, get more positive feedback like we've received today.
Yeah. Right.
I have to eat my words. They've done a good job across the board, and in particular, Nate, they've done an excellent job in the Peel Street toilets. Yeah, they have. But across the board and up the northern region, the community caretaker thing is working very well. And I notice whether they're overseers or supervisors or whatever they are, they're regularly up there monitoring what's going on. So all in all, no, well done to them, and eating a bit of humble pie, Bill.
Thank you. I likewise have comments of praise. They've done a fantastic job around our region. Now, I think in terms of cleanliness and tidiness, it's really our community who need to step on board and stop littering in all our beach car parks, and then and you see the amount of wash that comes out after a storm event in terms of plastic and things on our beach there that comes through the stormwater network. I think now we need to look at ourselves and start fixing our own problems. But in terms of the performance of the contractor, what's the plan around reporting? Because that's obviously the big red area in their KPI measurements. Are you looking at new reporting protocol?
Through the chair, there's so in terms of reporting, we receive a monthly report from Recreational Services, which is an overview of how that month's gone. We've also, as part of our monthly contract meeting, we go through our list of KPIs and identify, whether they've hit them or not. And so we've got really in-depth reporting mechanisms and key performance indicators to really gauge their performance, so that it's not just the feedback that we get, but it's actually tangible data that is real and shows the value of them as a contractor as a whole. What it also does is it gives them incentives for obviously contract extensions as well as capital work. So we resolved as part of a procurement process to give them any capital works up to the value of 50,000 for good performance across the board. So we're getting into that now because of their performance, and that's sort of quantified by the KPIs.
Thanks for that, Garrett. I sat through the review of the contract, it's a couple of months ago now, and it was an awesome day to sit down with an organisation that had such a good cultural focus with their employees and that's why it's reflecting in the good work that we're seeing out in the community. I mean, it's obvious when you drive past the facilities, the improvement, and it's just, you don't have to have someone tell you that something's improved. You can just see it as you drive past. So I think it's been a spectacular contract, really. One of the things that did come out in that was that the issue of the city centre waste, they were having troubles with meeting their contract on that. Do you know if that got resolved? What's been happening is they had a contract to remove the centre waste, but people weren't using the right bins. They're putting their recycle in the other bins. So then they are forced to sort that rubbish, and that was a real issue to them. Did we get any footage?
Thanks, Councillor Cranston. That's actually an issue that we face across our whole waste management activity, whether it's recreational services or waste management or our community caretakers. And Councillor Dowson's comment before about our behaviour as members of the community is really important here, because all it does is create time and cost for the community if we actually don't take our recycling facilities seriously. And so it's an ongoing thing, and I think the added interest in waste minimisation that we're seeing nationally and in Tairāwhiti at the moment is probably the best thing that could actually be happening around people's individual behaviour, their effects on the wider community in terms of cost and environmental impact, and what people can actually do to actually take more responsibility and less of an impact. So I think it's not necessarily something that recreational services can solve, but I think our community can solve, and is working to that because of wider environmental conditions out there around how we deal with waste.
The other thing I wasn't sure about was I've been spending a lot of time at the pool lately, and I wasn't aware that Rec Services had such a role down there. And there seemed to be an inefficiency, whereas the pool had a problem. They had to take the problem to Rec Services, and if it's the weekend, it's problematic. And then Rec Services had to solve the problem where there could have been a more direct route to some of the problems that were down there. So what is their role with the pool?
Through the chair, our whole focus of the contract basically was a full facilities maintenance contract. So we worked to get all of our community facilities and assets under the one umbrella, because that improves consistency, and improves quality of service, but it also protects council in terms of health and safety, so that we're comfortable that every contractor that works for us is goes through the SHE qualification process and has the right systems in place. Now, the pool itself, there is a bit of crossover in terms of the work that Rec Services does and some of the specialist technical work required by other contractors. So the pool has some intricate systems such as filtration systems, boiler servicing for the heating units, which we look to have them engaged directly with specialist contractors. Rec Services has an oversight over the pool in terms of basic maintenance of lawn, of some building assets, and other key maintenance requirements that we deem suitable for them. And we are working on some other finer technical requirements that potentially may not sit with Rec Services. An example that I can use is the War Memorial Theatre. So there's quite an intricate rigging system required there, and Rec Services don't play any part in that. We have to get a specialist contractor in to look at that, but they will look after the facade maintenance and basic R&M required of normal building maintenance.
Good, just a noting report, I guess, just to give you a summary and an update on the progress. So it really is an updating report to let you know that it is progressing. We're working quite closely with Crown Infrastructure Group as well, that it's happening, really.
I'm happy to move. I just had one question. Seen as the resource consent has been provided for Waiho's building, have they already started building up there? Do you know that or not yet?
Oh, we're not party to that information yet, yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay. All right, if nothing further, let a mover and a seconder. No, moved by Councillor Parringham, seconded by Councillor McLean. All those in favour? Against? Carried. That's all we have on our book. No? Okay, meeting closed. What do you want to do about OPEX? Do you want to do a paper first, or do you want to allude the committee to it after the meeting? Yeah, meeting's closed. Yeah.